Hello everybody, Ben Woodruff here with the Hutchings Museum. Today we're going to be touring around the edge of the Cedars Museum in Blanding, Utah. This is an incredible museum because it's a repository for artifacts from all around the state and the region, including stuff that was illegally looted from archaeological sites. When that happens and the government gets it back, it's brought here. There's some one-of-a-kind artifacts of all different kinds here. A lot of Western museums will have some basic stuff, but some of the artifacts here, I'll explain what they are, and they're gonna blow your mind. They're so unique. So this is a real treasure, this museum. I've kind of lost my voice, so you have to listen up, but I think we're gonna do okay. So we're gonna go ahead and go on in, and we're gonna take a look at this place. So in this first room right here, we have a lot of amazing photography from local photographers of all different kinds. The American West has some of the most beautiful picturesque landscapes during rainstorms and some of the ruins. There's some night photography shots, but we don't have a lot of time to go into all of this. So we're going to go past so we can take a look at the actual artifacts. But again, some of these photos, just absolutely mind-blowing. As we're going up these stairs, there's a recreation of a panel in this area that dates back supposedly all the way to the Ice Age. It's one of the oldest panels known to North America. It's kind of cool seeing it here. Recreated with the stucco, so you kind of get a sense of what that pictograph is actually like. All right, now taking a look over here. Again, just right off the bat, right out of the gates, this museum is mind-blowing. So one of the first things I want to show you right here is a throwing stick. It's a Native American boomerang. There's many ancient cultures that use boomerangs. The Egyptians mastered them. We always hear about them in Aboriginal Australia, but many Native American tribes hunted with a throwing stick. It's a really good way to hunt rabbits. There's other ways to hunt rabbits as well. You can see this net in the middle. You can weave nets out of plants like yucca or dogbane. You can make a big net and get everybody together, flush the rabbits into it and catch them. Next to that net, you can see a scissor snare, which is a way to set up a trap for a rabbit in an area that it clearly passes through regularly. And that makes it an easy way for you to get food without having to be there. Another thing that, again, the fact that this museum has this, you hear about these things, but you don't see it. Right in that little leather pouch, they found a hunk of salt. We take salt for granted today, but again, how priceless would salt have been for food and preservation and as a trade item? But this museum has an example of that little clump was stored and wrapped in that cloth and kept. Now this jar right here, this seed jar, still has squash seeds in it, which again is so incredibly rare. So many of these items, again, you're not going to find in any other museum like that. In this case, has a display, people would just walk past it, don't even realize what they're looking at, has a display of artifacts going back 12,000 years up at the top, Clovis points from Ice Age hunters, and they used them with a weapon called an atlatl, and you can see an image of how a person throws them. If you watch our videos in the museum, we've given demonstrations on how this weapon works, but a lot of times the shaft would break, so you would make a foreshaft like that point there, that hooks on and can come out. So if the shaft breaks, you can replace the shaft easily and just put that foreshaft with a dart point in it. It's really ingenious thinking. Over time, different types of hunting techniques switched from atlatls to bows and arrows, and that's when you get different types of points later on. This thing I haven't seen anywhere else in any museum ever. This is like a conveyor belt for storing arrowheads. So you look down here, Each arrowhead is wrapped into a bit of cordage, wrap the next one, wrap the next one. So you just take one out, hook it on. Take one out, hook it on. And you see that glob, that black thing on the end? That is pine pitch, made from pine tree sap and charcoal ground up from a fire to make a reusable glue. It's heated over the fire and you put it in. That whole thing is an arrow hafting kit. I've never seen anything like that anywhere in any museum. It's so simple and it's so ingenious, but you just do not see something like that anywhere else. And I love that it's on display here. And I wish people understood it better. Again, having that little glob at the end, it's like they got the whole thing right there. No extra weight needed. It's cool. Let's see what else we got. Some of these over here, we've got some effigies. Now on top, these are stone effigies representing a burden basket. And there's a little picture in the back of what a burden basket is, something you carry, kind of like a Native American backpack. So that effigies of those. There's also animal effigies, which are very rare. It's a foot effigy, and then these are birds. You know, animal effigies in the region, they happen, but they're kind of rare. Then down below here, we have some faces. These look very similar to the pilling figures that were found in the 9 Mile Canyon region. And then down in the bottom, this little mug or little vase here has a lizard holding on for the handle. And this one has a coyote. And that coyote has a tiny little turquoise eye. That's incredibly hard to do because ceramic is ceramic, stone is stone. So having to drill into ceramic and then glue that eye in, that's a really beautiful piece. And again, this would have been really quite a priceless thing, priceless trade item in its own time. And of course, it's priceless to us today because of what it teaches us and the value it is. This, again, this is absolutely wild. Before horses, the only draft animal Native Americans had was a dog. Dogs were used to haul like teepees and packs of burden. But they were also used as companionship and they helped in the hunt. But no resource goes unused. So you have here sashes and rope woven out of shed dog fur. And you also have a few clay effigies of dogs. And again, this is absolutely nuts. You hear about this, you hear, oh yeah, they use dogs, yeah, they maybe use some of the fur to make rope, but literally, there is rope made from dog fur, and there is a beautiful patterned sash woven out of dog fur. It's so cool. And it's so neat, you actually get to see the real thing. All right, when you are having to alter the material world around yourself, human hands are good at manipulating the environment, but they're not very strong. And that's where stone axes come in. Stone axes are very basic. These are usually depicted incorrectly as weapons. They're not. These are used for cutting wood and doing things. Now, one of the ways you would do that, these are not metal. It takes a lot of work to cut down a tree. So one of the things you do if you're going to cut down a big tree is you put clay about this high, and then you light a fire underneath. The fire burns up to the clay level, and then you keep cutting as it's burning, and then you fell that tree. Makes it easier. But again, you would attach any of these stone axes to a handle, or you can use it yourself. You can also use these as a bone axe. And if you're doing that, you just wrap one side with leather. So you cut, when you're butchering an animal, you butcher down to the meat level, and then you get down to the bone, and then you take that, wrap leather around it, and cut through, and then cut the rest of the way. So these stone axes were very valuable for many different things. These artifacts are canteens. These are for storing water, carrying water over distance. They're all very beautiful and very unique examples, but I really love this one at the bottom. Okay, this style right here that we see, it's got a bird. And again, it's also got a person over here, looks like with a weapon. Okay, that's very rare. We see this kind of style being really common in the Mimbres region, but not much else. So anytime you see an animal like this, almost looks like a cat face. And again, there's a bird and a human figure here. But again, these are water canteens. You know, you cover up the top with leather, wrap them around so the water doesn't slosh out. You can see there's little loops that you tie on so you can carry them. It's good thinking. It's heavy, but it's good because you don't know where your next drink is going to be. You got to be able to haul that water. This case here has a lot of different things. There's a lot of stone axes, but there's some bone awls. We got a lot of bone awls at our museum as well, but it's always good to see them. So most of these are deer cannon bones, and the one in back is from a turkey pelvis. Now, a bone awl, when you are sewing today, if you're sewing by hand, you have a metal sewing needle, and you're sewing. You can't do that. You can't do that with bone needles. They will break. So what you do is you have an awl, and you pre-punch all your holes, and then you don't sew, you lace. It's called lacing because you're going through pre-punched holes. That keeps your needle intact. So bone awls are really good for pre-punching in that way. Now there's also a really beautiful yucca fiber moccasin right here, a sandal. Let's move them over to sandal. We're going to look at different examples. Some of them are very tight, some of them are very loose. But again, anytime you think about this, somebody took a plant and wove it into their footwear. You look down what I'm wearing on today, and I've got these chacos, but it's the same idea, keeping yourself from stepping in thorns and getting cut up. Other than that, it's hot. You don't want to wear moccasins in the summer. Okay. This is another really cool example here. This is a sandal, but if you look underneath, there's fur. It looks like it's probably deer fur. So this was a sandal that had fur on the bottom. Now, I have actually made moccasins with elk hide on the bottom, and it lasts longer, but it also makes you walk silently. Nothing can hear you. And so I wonder if that was also the case. But again, this is beautifully woven. And this is, again, if you look over here, this is another thing that you're not going to see in any other museum. So in modern archery today, you'll have like a broadhead arrow, but if you're learning to do archery and you don't want to tear up your target, you have a blunt rubber tip you put on so you can learn how to do archery without destroying the target or the arrow. And this is a blunt for an atlatl. You've got the tip of a deer cannon bone, and it's got a foreshaft that's removable. Now, this is good for learning with a target, but it's also good for going after something small, like a turkey or a rabbit, something that you don't want to tear it up too much. So you use this blunt point to thump it, you get your dinner, and you don't tear it up. But then you take that out, and if you're hunting big game, you put in a foreshaft with an actual blade. And again, people walk past this and have no idea what it is, and yet I have never seen this in any other museum. It's absolutely incredible. This case here has what's left of a loom. Now, if you look down below and on the sides, you can see it. In the photo in back, you can see a Navajo woman actually using a loom in the traditional way. So natural fibers today, mostly sheep fibers are used, but all kinds of fibers were used anciently. And again, weaving in this way, you can make beautiful concentric patterns, and natural earth pigments from the area like red ochre and yellow ochre were used to make these beautiful blankets. And again, these are still a symbol of the West today. But this right here, these are actual pieces from an actual loom that was found at the Bullet Canyon site. Now, working ceramics, it takes a lot of effort to find the right clay, to clean it properly, to make something and to fire it properly without it shattering. Another alternative to that is to weave a basket and waterproof it with pine pitch. So this is a basket, and you can still see the clumps of pine tree sap all over it. You heat that pine tree sap up, and you goop it all over. It makes it incredibly heavy, but it makes it waterproof. You can also cook in it. Now, if you just put this in a fire, it would catch on fire. So what you do, you fill it with water, and then you take rocks, and you put rocks in a fire. And then when those rocks get red hot, you pick them up with antlers, drop them in, and they start to boil the water on the inside. Now, you don't want those rocks to touch the bottom and start hitting the pine pitch on the inside, so you put just a couple of sprigs of pine fir down there as well. But then, while those rocks are boiling the water, you put in a bit of rabbit meat, you put a bit of cornmeal in there, and you can make yourself a little soup, a little bit of porridge just out of that. So again, really amazing thinking, using a basket to carry water and to even boil food in. Now, when we're talking like Western culture, A lot of times people see what's kind of considered the Southwest motif. It's kind of like these zigzag patterns. And it's just, that's Western. You see it everywhere, colorful, it's beautiful. But you know what? That actually started with baskets, because baskets, the natural weaving is going to have up and down zigzag patterns. And if you want to add a different piece of fiber that you're weaving in, suddenly you can do the beginnings of patterns. Now later on, these kind of patterns you see in ceramics, you see it in pottery, where you have these beautiful patterns painted on. But again, those are reminiscent and inspired from original patternings we see in baskets. And I go, this is a very simple pattern, but again, we'll see some far more elaborate imagery in a minute. This case right here has really, it runs the gamut of quality of weave when it comes to woven yucca sandals. Some of these two down on the bottom, one of these is very similar to the one we looked at earlier that had fur on the bottom. But again, that weave pattern is so tight, and this is like as tight as paper. And then you look at this one, and it's just just really simple, very rudimentary. And again, some of these on these end, far more rudimentary. So it depends. What is your skill level? How much time do you have? And what resources do you have available? But yucca is a tough plant. If you dry it out, it's worthless. So you got to cut it, strip off the cellulose off the outside, and then separate those inside fibers. Those will then last and can be woven at a later time. So sometimes at archaeological sites, we do find big old huge bundles of just raw yucca fiber meant to be woven in to really fine sandals such as these. This, behind this glass here, this area is actually visible storage for the museum. So in other words, they have so many artifacts, they can't display them all with actual good interpretive displays. So instead, it's on, and there's even a little computer kiosk. You can type in and go and kind of learn more about each item if you want. But the first one I want to point out here is this ladder. Now, ladders in the Southwest were, of course, used to climb in and out of kivas, in and out of pueblos. We normally see like a modern ladder nailed in with big old nails or screws or bolts, carriage bolts. But this is one of the ways they're made. This is an actual ladder recovered from a site. And the interesting thing about it, it's lashed, but it's lashed with willow. So willow, when it's fresh and green, you can strip it and you can basically use it as a coarse rope. And if you look close at how this was put together, this is a very unusual but very ingenious way if you don't have a lot of good cordage. This is easier than having to hand weave cordage out of yucca or dogbane, which would be the most commonly used forms of cordage around here. But again, this whole thing was woven together in such a simple way. But again, these ladders don't normally remain intact and aren't normally found. These are very unique. These are wooden plates. That's not something that normally we ever see, and not only something that's preserved. But it's interesting that there's a very specific style. They're kind of cubed. They have a nice bit of a gentle curve to them, but they're lovingly carved around all edges. And again, that's really special to see something like that. From this same site, these knives were recovered. They're very unique. These knives, the blades were hafted onto the wooden handles using pine pitch glue. And we looked earlier on, you remember that glob of pine pitch glue next to that bundle of arrowheads? Well, this pine pitch glue is reusable. It's heated up over fire, it gets tacky, you push it in, and it hardens. And again, each of these have that, and they each have a handle with a hole drilled in and a little bit of cordage below. So a very odd style, but again, a style that is noteworthy because we don't see this anywhere else. So this is a really cool item to have here. Now we're looking at the treasure of this museum, in my opinion, and this is a macaw feather sash. These are made from a scarlet macaw, so these bright scarlet feathers and also blue feathers, which are also from the scarlet macaw. But up top, that squirrel skin is made from a local species, a local red tree squirrel. So what are the feathers for? Well, a lot of people don't realize how much trade went back and forth from Mexico to this region. People incorrectly think that all of this was just, everybody just kind of local little tribes. They don't realize the vast trade networks that existed. And part of that was intentional. After World War II, then the new Mexican government was trying to find ways to boost tourism. And there were all these, after World War I, there were all these soldiers coming back from the war that were shell-shocked. They were just shattered, and they said, hey, well, we like this idea of what they called pueblo mystique, and this is written in the notes of the town elders when they'd have city council meetings. I mean, it's on record in books. And they said, let's kind of promote this idea of Zen prayer farmers of the past. Come see the ruins of the American Southwest. It's just peaceful and local, and just kind of come and heal your soul, your troubled soul. And so the idea that we already knew that these people traded back and forth all the way to central Mexico was kind of lost. And here's part of the proof of it. We know that macaws, red scarlet macaws and blue and gold macaws were kept live in pens in Paquime, Mexico, which is about 60 miles across the Mexican border. And they were traded, not only the feathers, but the live birds were traded northward. They also traded copper bells, and cacao beans. And we're going to see some of that in just a minute. But we got to take a good look at this beautiful scarlet macaw feather sash. There's nothing else like this in any other museum in the United States. You got to get down to Paquime, Mexico before you start to see these kind of things. So we're still looking at some of this visual storage. I want you to take a look at some of these amazing pottery styles. Now, again, some of these patterns are, again, what we talked earlier about what's considered Southwest, that originally evolved from shaping with baskets. But some of these are very specific in the math. And a lot of people don't know this, but a lot of the tribes locally, there were three plants, Salvia divinorum, Datura strammonia, and peyote. And when consumed, they can help an artist understand specific mathematical patterns, repetitive and demonstrable repetitive patterns. And so if you look at some of these pots, especially like this big one here in the center, you'll start to see some of these concentric repeating patterns. And again, we do know from residues found in some of the pots that, again, some of those three plants were sometimes taken as part of the artistic process. We don't know all the tradition that went along with it, but it is absolutely fascinating to understand that some of this math is repeatable today. We're going to start with looking at what's normally called like a keyhole mug. Now, we got one of these at the Hutchings Museum. You can come see in person as well. But take a look at these two mugs right here, and you notice there's what kind of looks like a keyhole on top. It's not a keyhole. It's what in archaeology we call the T aperture. Now, this is indicative of a doorway that we see originating from Chaco Canyon, New Mexico, and then radiating out as a cultural tradition. Now, I remember when I went to Mesa Verde the first time and some ranger tried to pawn off the dumb idea that, they had doors shaped that way because when they would have a bundle of firewood over their shoulders, that way they could walk straight in the door. It's absolute nonsense. This shape, we don't know exactly what it meant, but we know it was sacred and it was meaningful, and not everybody had access to this shape. In fact, we know that it was such an important shape that in Paquime, Mexico, there were two altars about the size of a box fan carved out of quartzite, which is a dense stone. It's not sandstone. And they had offerings on top of them. So it's a doorway, but it's much more. It's also in and of itself an iconic symbol. And again, because we don't have a written language, we don't know exactly what it meant. But again, the T aperture starts at Chaco, New Mexico, radiates out, and in Paquime, Mexico, like almost every door, there's hundreds of doors that have that aperture, and it spreads out. So whatever it was an important symbol, and not everybody in society had access to it. That's why to find a keyhole mug like this is rare and very special. You'll find much more elaborate patterning than this, but again, that is very rare, and it is worthy to take a moment and note. These are some of the coolest treasures, and people just walk past them here. So down below, we have a copper bell traded up from Mexico. Now, cacao beans were also traded up from the Puerto Vallarta region of Mexico. You have shells. You even have turquoise and abalone from the Gulf of Mexico. These items were traded, and again, we know that the place that stored all of these, that was a big trade hub, was Paquime, Mexico. Sometimes it's also called Casas Grandes, which is not to be confused with Casa Grande. That's a different site. Casas Grandes or Paquime, again, that's the place that had the T-door aperture altars. It's the place that had pens storing hundreds of live turkeys and hundreds of live macaws that were literally feather factories. They had huge, 10-foot deep storerooms filled to top to bottom with abalone shell and little conch shells. They had copper bells, cacao beans, and it was a trade hub that traded from these exotic places all the way up to this region here, which is why you get these incredible trade items. And again, it might not look that exciting to today, but in its time, this was living posh. This was living decadent. If you could have some items like these, they were highly sought after. And again, it's such a gift that we have these here to be able to see and connect to the past.